when we're not caring for our own souls as we lead, and we're essentially depleted inside, then it's very easy for evil to tempt us and to eventually take us out. And so we should not confuse a holy fear with self-doubt, but simply one of reliance on God. The harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few. We don't need less leaders, we need more leaders, but leaders who can remain humble and utterly dependent on God's grace to make it through. Another leader falls. This happens time and time again. And each time it happens, it's easy to shake our heads in disbelief or to mock them in their current situation. But what if their headline is not just their story, but also potentially our story? What if what's working in their life that took them out is already at work and taking root in our story? I was talking with a group of guys a few weeks ago about our lament over so many leaders in these past few years that have fallen, even within the Christian community. And there was a sense of betrayal, there was a sense of anger, there was a sense of a sadness in our sharing the different stories, the different experiences. And I shared with them in that lament. At the same time, I found myself wanting to go deeper, to create a different space, because I've also had the honor, the privilege of working with various leaders and pastors and the like through their dark days. Some who, before headlines have hit, have come in to sort through things, and some after the headlines have hit, that come in to pick up the pieces. And part of what I realized is that all of these stories, the fall didn't happen out of nowhere. It didn't happen in isolation, but was part of a long thread, a crack that had began in their story, maybe even years before. And part of that crack is in their desire to help, they lost their humanity. And so in their focus on helping others, at least the men that I work with, who are often helpers by their very nature, whether that is in ministry or other forms of leadership, they have a genuine heart to want to care and serve those around them. But in their serving, they forget to actually care for themselves. And so in this way, they forget that they're Clark Kent. They just are Superman and want to help and serve, but neglecting the care of their own soul in the process. And so part of their challenge is learning, as it has been said elsewhere, how to be a reservoir and not simply the canal, where the reservoir leads or gives from its abundance, where the canal gives from its lack. When we're not caring for our own souls as we lead, and we're essentially depleted inside, then it's very easy for evil to tempt us and to eventually take us out. And it's for this reason that we need to have a holy fear before taking on positions of leadership. That certainly leadership is a platform. It gives us an opportunity to speak and influence the lives of others. But it's also a mantle that we're taking on. And so it's a holy and sacred calling that God has appointed us to, and we must have a due reverence and pause before taking on that position. That certainly when it comes to advancing God's kingdom, that taking on that position of leadership now puts us in the enemy's crosshairs. And so now we're on his watch list, as it were, that he will not ignore us in the same way, because we're now on the front lines advancing God's kingdom of light. And so we need to consider the weight of what we're entering into, the battle that we're entering into as we take on these positions of leadership. That is not something to take lightly. This can play out in marriage as well. I've talked with many young guys approaching marriage, and there's a sense of nervousness before moving into marriage. And this is not simply being shy or having cold feet or running from commitment, but there's a part of them that is pausing in a good way before taking on the holy commitment, the holy vows of marriage. And I think that same pause is what's needed before we take on roles of leadership, whether in the church or outside the church. How do we have a holy pause, a holy reverence of recognizing the weight, the burden, the mantle of what we're about to enter into? The influence that we're about to have, but also the pressure and the tax that may come our way as well. I believe this holy fear is the only way that we can survive marriage and any position of leadership that we take as well, where it keeps us low and dependent on God. And so it's not shrinking back. It's not being a coward and shrinking back from the duty, the call that God has given us, but it is recognizing that we need grace in order to make it through. And so it keeps us from relying on our own strength, our own efforts. It keeps us away from pride, assuming that we can do this in our own strength, and recognizing, no, we need God's grace in order to make this through. And so we should not confuse a holy fear with self-doubt, but simply one of reliance on God. And as we accept these positions, are we walking with God, or are we simply carrying ourselves in our own momentum, in our own strength? And so if you're in leadership or stepping into it, pause, breathe, let a holy fear settle you, not in self-doubt, but to ground you in God's grace so that you can show up with the fullness of self, with the fullness of heart to bring more life and goodness into the world around you and not become yet another headline of a leader being taken out in some moral failure. The harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few. We don't need less leaders. We need more leaders, but leaders who can remain humble and utterly dependent on God's grace to make it through. Leaders who are not disconnected from their humanity, but recognizing even as they serve others, even as they bring a blessing to others, for them to be filled up on God's life and love and presence themselves, so they're giving from their overflow, they're giving from their abundance and blessing the lives of others. If this resonates with you, then like and subscribe and share with other men who might be contemplating various roles of leadership. And then check out this next video, and let's continue the conversation about how we can rise and reign as kingdom men throughout our life and relationships. Check that out here.